Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, classic phrase west of the state's border is don't mess with Texas. Well, this weekend, Louisiana will be doing just the opposite as the football season begins in earnest, with LSU going to Austin to play the Texas Longhorns and with the Houston Texans opening the Saints season Monday night here at the Superdome. We'll look tonight at what is expected to be an exciting season, barring, of course, missed calls by referees. We'll also look at legal cases against a former sheriff and a New Orleans state senator. Federal support came in this week for the Union Passenger Terminal, and City Hall ponders the question of affordable housing in too many dollar stores. All of this, plus a look at the race for Jefferson Parish president, are up there in our lineup for tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, the producer of Informed Sources. Doug Mouton, sports director, WWL-TV Channel 4. Jessica Williams, reporter of the Times-Picayune New Orleans Advocate, and Gordon Russell, the newspaper's managing editor for investigations. We're going to go first to Gordon because there are a couple of public officials, former public officials, I should say, who are really facing some legal issues right now, one with a couple of indictments, another one now under federal investigation.
Right. The first is former St. Tammany Parish Sheriff Jack Strain, who we've been sort of waiting for these indictments for some time now. One of them just came down last week, which was his indictment in what's sort of a garden variety public corruption scheme, or alleged public corruption scheme, in which he is alleged to have taken kickbacks from two of his lieutenants that he had set up in this work release business that was overseen by the sheriff. Supposedly they periodically paid him off with cash from time to time. The feds haven't said how much cash. The bigger case against Jack Strain is a sort of really shocking case, a state case involving numerous allegations of molesting children, not young children, but certainly children well under the age of consent, over a period of years. And there's 4 alleged victims who are part of this case. And one of the things we learned recently is the connection between these two cases is that one of the people involved in the alleged corruption scheme with the work release program, who was a captain at the sheriff's office, was also supposedly one of his victims in the sex crimes case. And the idea that the feds have sketched out in this indictment is that the work release program, which allowed this captain to profit, was sort of a payback almost for what the sheriff had done to him, and sort of a way to keep him close.
So that is a lot on the plate right there.
I should add that Strain denies all of these allegations.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you. I mean, what is Strain saying about this?
He's not saying very much, but he's saying he intends to vigorously defend himself. And of course, the rape allegations are very serious, and with a conviction at trial would result in an automatic life sentence. So he's looking at, some serious penalties if he's convicted.
And then the Fed charges too. What kind of penalty?
They would be much less. I mean, we might be talking about a few years on those charges if he were convicted.
How would it work with both a state and a federal indictment? Would one supersede the other, or is that for the lawyers to work out?
They sort of operate on parallel tracks, and he would be tried in one and then the other, although there's an option there's a potential for like a global plea deal. If that was something that Strain were interested in, he could potentially work something out with all parties in which they stipulate that he would do a certain amount of time in prison. And that's something that he may be looking at, although he's not saying that that's something he's looking at.
And the other case that we wanted to talk about was former state senator.
Right, who is actually still a state senator for the time being.
Right,
but
he's sought not to seek, chose not to seek re-election.
Wesley Bishop from New Orleans East, a Democrat from New Orleans East, who announced to people's surprise that he was not going to seek re-election. And there had been some stories about him that Fox 8, Lee Zurich did at Fox 8, involving potential payroll fraud. He's a vice chancellor or associate chancellor at SUNO. And there were times when he was putting in for sick leave and then getting paid for working in Baton Rouge as a legislator. And there were at least 100 days where that happened, and it added up to maybe $50,000 in payments he received that maybe he shouldn't have. And he's since paid some of that back, but that's one vector of this federal case that's being built against him. And the other involves a fourplex that he owns in New Orleans East that he got a forgivable loan to renovate from the Road Home program of about $200,000. And I went out there recently. It appears that it has not been renovated. It hasn't had water service for 6 or 7 years. And the idea with this program was you're supposed to renovate this property and then rent to low-income people. It was a way to rebuild the city's damaged housing stock after Katrina. And it doesn't appear there's been any tenants for a number of years. And the question is whether he's supposed to be reporting to the Road Home on the tenants and that he has these places rented and who's renting them and their incomes. And I don't know whether he's been reporting that or not.
Has it ever been rented? Was it even renovated? And
It's hard to tell whether it's been renovated. It's not in great shape, but I don't believe it's been rented in the entire time because it hasn't had water service, and it seems hard to imagine that you would rent a place without water service.
And this was a forgivable loan if it met certain
Right,
conditions.
so after 10 years, if he complied with all the requirements, he would not have to pay back the $200,000. And it's possible that the question I think is whether he's been saying that these apartments have been rented.
So that now is under investigation.
That's
too.
a second piece of this investigation.
Okay. So response from him? What does he
No
have to say about this?
response. I was unable to speak with him. I spoke to a representative of his who may be his lawyer, did not want to sort of confirm that he was his lawyer, but that person did not want to respond either.
So we say investigation. Is there a timetable on this?
I mean, I think that there will be charges filed, and I think it'll be fairly soon.
Okay. All right, Gordon. Thanks a lot. And now we're going to go over to Jessica and our Union Passenger Terminal, which is it was built in the 50s, I think. It was opened in the 50s. It sort of needs a facelift, and it has gotten some money to get that, to be rehabbed a bit.
It has gotten some money. The important thing about this is it really is not a full-scale renovation of the facility, but is really remedying an issue that has been in place for a long time, which is that it is not accessible in all cases when you're boarding for riders with disabilities. And so what they're going to do is essentially elevate the platforms so that when you board a train, you can roll right on if you have a wheelchair, and you don't need to be put on this wheelchair lift. It doesn't need to be this complicated process. You can just go right in. And that's been something that Amtrak and the City of New Orleans have worked out for a while. They received a federal grant of $3.7 million, and Amtrak kicked in an extra $900,000 to be able to renovate that portion of the facility. In addition, the platform's canopies are going to be extended. They're also going to look at refurbishing some of the mechanical and electrical equipment that services the trains. And all in all, the mayor and Amtrak sees this as a way to bring the terminal, make it more suitable for everyday use, but also to really bolster it for all riders in the case that it needs to be used for an evacuation, which is something that the mayor has been very forthcoming about. She wants to be able to have that terminal be a point of reference for folks that need to get out of the city quickly, and she sees rail as a good way of doing that.
When that station was built, it was they call it Union Passenger because there were several train stations, and they closed them and united them behind one place that would serve all railroads. It's a beautiful modern train station for the time, but it was built right around the time when passenger rail service was starting to decline. And
With the rise of the airports,
what's
yeah.
amazing is that we have 3 lines that serve New Orleans, to Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. So we have incredibly good train service. I don't know how many people take advantage of it. The trains look to me, they kind of leave here empty. I mean, they pick up people along the way, but we do have
Not
good
the
trains.
fastest train service, but we can go to a
No,
lot
yeah,
of places.
no, it's not high speed trains, but it's good. It's there.
There's also bus service there, right?
There's also Greyhound, there's Megabus, goes to several different locations, Atlanta, Houston, other places in Georgia. And, really the mayor sort of sees it as an opportunity to spruce up and draw more public interest in a station that she feels can be a key transportation asset.
And also a key route is maybe close to returning, a route to Mobile?
A route to
Gulf
Mobile that
Coast?
recently got about $37 million, and the Southern Railroad Commission has been really gung-ho about establishing more connections in the Gulf Coast for train service. We had that before Katrina. Since Katrina, it's been damaged, or by Katrina, it was damaged, and they want to be able to bring that back. And there also has been, support for a high-speed rail between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. And the mayor, when asked about that, does this project one more step towards getting that? What do you think about the possibility? She said, well, I'm always going to be in support of that, and my sister mayor in Baton Rouge will always be in support of that. But, unfortunately, plans of that nature have sort of been floated and said for about 2 decades, and they don't usually go anywhere.
But Mobile looks to be more of a likelihood,
Yes.
do you think?
Yes,
Okay.
the money is in place, is my understanding.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jessica. All right, Doug, it's time that so many people have really been waiting for. They're still not over what happened to us last year, but the Saints season gets started on Monday. Yay.
Yeah, and the Saints start the season. It is an enormously talented roster. I sincerely believe there is not a deeper, more talented roster in the NFL. Now, look, getting to a Super Bowl and winning a Super Bowl requires 100 things to go your way, but you want to start with the deepest, most talented team, and I think the Saints do. I think when we talk about this team, I think the one thing that maybe doesn't get played high enough is that Sean Payton is a great NFL coach, one of the great coaches of his generation. He has maximized what he has for the most part in his time in New Orleans, and he's got a terrific roster. You need some luck, you need people to stay healthy, but there is no reason to believe this team can't make a long playoff run.
Who are the real star players, do you think? Who should we be looking at?
Well, look,
really achieve?
That is two things about this team. One is that their lower end starters are really good players. The Saints have a lot of really good players, and they have a ton of guys on the bench that would be starting for many teams, but they also have a group of superstars. Obviously, it starts with Drew Brees. Mike Thomas, at worst, is among the 3 best wide receivers in football. Cam Jordan, at worst, is among the 3 best defensive linemen in football. And then the one magic number they talk about in the NFL is your 3rd year. They put an asterisk by a 3rd year. 3rd year is when a lot of guys have breakout years. It takes a couple of years to get there, to learn things, to get the ins and outs. Alvin Kamara, who has been spectacular, is entering his 3rd year. My one big breakout guy for this year is Marshawn Lattimore, and I know that's funky to say. He was the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year his rookie year, took a step back his 2nd year. I think he has a chance to be a great player in his 3rd year. It's Ryan Ramczyk's 3rd year, who the Saints voted as their own offensive MVP last year. He's the right tackle. Again, an enormously talented roster. You need luck. You need no call like what happened in the playoffs. Look, and I think that will show you what happened in the playoffs, how much of a tightrope you're walking, how tiny that window is, and what you need to happen. Because as good as they were, and I've said this a bunch, I think the Saints have had 3 Super Bowl championship caliber teams, and only one of them won a Super Bowl. Because in 11, which I would argue was their best team ever, look, they ran into a juggernaut in San Francisco. Alex Smith had his greatest game ever, and they lost. That team, no doubt in my mind, gets in the Super Bowl, wins by 2 touchdowns. The team in 09 was obviously good enough because they did win it. And the team last year obviously should have been in the Super Bowl, and I think they were good enough to win it. 3 times you were good enough.
But the team that lost in Minnesota, on the Minnesota.
I did not quite think the team in 17 was ready yet. It was a lot of rookie. Look, that was a terrific team. And one of the best teams in Saints history. I still think if they had gone to Philadelphia, they wouldn't. It was Philadelphia's year. And I don't think, and now you could obviously make an argument the other way. I didn't quite think they were ready in 17. I thought they were definitely ready in 18, and there's no reason to think at this point, and it's still September, that this team can't be the 4th one.
No, the team was ready, the people were ready, the fans were ready in 18. Has the team really shaken it off? I mean, a lot of the fans really haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think they have. And look, it's a veteran team. You can use negative situations as motivation if your mindset is the right way. I think they have. Look, we did the most informal, non-scientific poll. It's called Megaphone, that we run like instant polling on TV. And we did a poll about a week ago. Are you over what happened at the end of last season? And the answers were, no, I'm still angry, or yes, I'm over it and ready for the new season. And we got 80-20 people ready for the new season. No one's ever going to forget it. But what I have seen this summer is a fan doubling down. we have seen more fans at practice. Now, granted, they have more seats now, a louder response, more response at every Saints event. I think people have gone the opposite. They were angry. I thought the way it all played out was a healthy way to vent your anger through the Super Bowl. And I do think the fan base is ready and, if possible, more passionately ready.
Did you want
Well, I
to
just
comment?
wonder, I understand it takes luck and circumstances and the whole narrow window thing, but why is it the luck and circumstance and narrow window always play for New England?
Well, New England, like the Saints, have had a team Super Bowl ready, and they have been able to cash in on it better than other teams. Look, New England's done a lot of things in building the team. They actually have had more draft picks than any other team because they've played the rules of supplemental draft, and they've traded away picks and gotten double the picks back. So they've been able to get a group of talent in that has replenished. Look, Bill Belichick is the greatest coach of his generation. It's why I say Sean Payton is one of the greatest of his generation. What Bill Belichick has done in this incredibly competitive market where it's hard to gain a competitive advantage is literally phenomenal. And New England has been able to do it year after year in a way that no one else has hit that. Now, you could certainly make an argument, and if you look at records over this decade, the Saints are one of the five elite franchises, but New England is the elite of the elite. They are what they are, and everyone else is chasing.
So how do we start this Monday?
I like the Saints' chances. Sean Payton has shown no interest in being the best team in the NFL in September. They've lost the last 5 openers, but I love the Saints' chances. It's a veteran team. They're breaking in very little new guys. They have a new center in Eric McCoy, and that is really it. That was the weird thing about training camp. We weren't talking about position battles. We're talking about backup battles. And that is enormously different and unusual. I love the Saints' chances Monday night.
Okay, we're with you.
Everyone is.
We go for the win. All right, thanks a lot, Doug. Over to you. Another race of a different kind. An election in Jefferson Parish for
Well,
president.
on the ballot this year, the statewide elections don't seem like they're going to be that competitive. And there's a lot of legislative elections, but probably from a spectator's point of view, the most interesting election is the Jefferson Parish president, where Mike Kenny's not running for re-election. And it's really a two-person run between Cynthia Lee Chang and John Young. But both of them bring like an interesting background. John Young is a former parish president who first became parish president in an election after Aaron Broussard got in trouble. And now he's running an election after Mike Guinea got in trouble. And so, and then Cynthia Lee Chang, who's just, of course, her dad was Harry Lee, who was a beloved figure for many years, but really made a reputation of her own as a council member. There's not a lot of polling, but it seems like people say that it's really very, very close at this election. One indication that I think we're going to start seeing more endorsements is that which way the business community might go, and of course that's important because of money, is that the Political Action Committee of the Jefferson Parish Chamber this past week endorsed Cynthia Lee Chang. And so that was probably just a good possibility. A question that some people have, and of course both these people are well known, long connections, is the black vote in Jefferson Parish. And Harry Lee, that there were a couple of issues that people remember, like the bridges after Katrina and, and stopping people from Orleans Parish. So some people are wondering if that's going to be an issue, or maybe it won't. Maybe that's just a long time ago. And at the same time, over the course of a career, he built a lot of connections too. So,
Well, as you said, both of the candidates are really known to the residents of Jefferson Parish in their own right. But at this point, close race, you're saying.
at this point, it's a close race, yeah.
October 12th.
October
That's when
12th.
folks go to the poll. All righty. Thanks a lot. Jessica, back over to you. And a big issue in New Orleans, in Orleans Parish, is affordable housing, and something that really seems to be on the mayor's mind. And she's trying to come up with a strategy of how to take care of this so that people can afford to live in the city. What are some of her ideas?
It's been interesting. The mayor has really taken this up as one of her mantles. But one of the interesting things about the proposal that she just came out with is she wants to know if tiny houses could be a way to resolve people, who are just sick and tired of paying mortgages, who have lived large for a long time and are looking to downsize.
So let's describe tiny house.
So a tiny house is usually a home that is no larger than about 500 feet. In some cases, they go even smaller than that. And this really could be a conversion of your shed into a home, a second home for you. Or it could be where you actually purchase a home that's usually made and shipped in on wheels, and you can set it up either in your yard or on land that you own. There's an entire network that's been created about the fad of this around the nation, as people are either looking to have experiences and taking their homes around the country, or are looking to downsize and are in some financial trouble.
So that is something that the city is thinking about, is changing the rules on use of an accessory building, like a shed or something. So with the tiny houses, are they thinking of tiny house subdivision or a tiny house in your backyard?
It's interesting. The mayor has not said specifically whether she would want to do tiny house villages, as is popular in Seattle. There's one in San Antonio, and those are particularly, the one in San Antonio, I believe, is particularly designed for formerly homeless individuals who are on the street and who just need a place to feel safe and to rest at night. And then she hasn't said whether she wants to do something like that or whether she wants to do where you set it up in your backyard and convert your old shed into a house. She really wants the City Planning Commission to tell her what idea is best. And it's not just tiny houses. She's also looking at potential bans on the conversion of former or of current residential property into commercial property. For a time period, you would just say no developer can turn a former house into an office, and let's see how that works. She's really trying a bunch of different ideas to see what sticks. And there's also a constitutional amendment on the ballot coming up soon that she's been promoting. Again, in line with this idea of affordable housing, the city would essentially say, okay, for a certain amount of folks that can come in and say that they're cash strapped, we would freeze property taxes at a certain level. And that's really something that's going to have to be decided statewide because it would require an amendment to the Constitution.
It would also impact the city budget, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
So that's a consideration as well. The city is getting some money from the state. Did they not just get a grant for affordable housing?
The city has received about $28 million from the state for affordable housing, and usually that is distributed through its Office of Community Development. It goes often into large residential projects to subsidize and to help those projects get built in New Orleans. And this again ties into all of the strategies that she wants to put forth in order to help try to solve the affordable housing crisis.
Affordable housing, an issue that we're going to continue to hear a lot about, it would seem.
I don't think that there's going to be any shortage of talking about affordable housing.
Okay, I'm going to have you touch on also now discount stores like dollar stores, Family Dollar. There's now supposedly going to be a limit to them. They can only build like 2 miles apart or something in New Orleans East, is that
right? So the council still has to approve that. The City Planning Commission was instructed by the council to look into the idea of putting a limit on discount stores, and the City Planning Commission did studies, and what it really found was that in places where these discount stores tend to operate, it can often either crowd out the market for supermarkets that want to come in and set up fresh food, or they set up in places where supermarkets aren't already. And then once they go, a supermarket like Rouse's, for example, it's hard to compete with that sort of grab all, you've got your household items and then you've got your canned foods and your frozen foods, and you can sell them at a pretty cheap amount. And so that's what they had found
so
to
it's
be
not
happening.
fresh food that they have, and so they're
No.
prohibiting the fresh food places.
And so this ordinance that the council has asked the City Planning Commission to consider would limit the dollar stores to proliferate within a 2-mile radius in New Orleans East, where there's a lot of them already. Any new ones would be subject to the 2-mile ban. And then around the rest of the city, it would be a 1-mile ban that would be put in place. They would also be required to reserve a specific portion of their shelf space for fresh food, and not just canned food and not just processed food.
And also, if a full grocery store would go in, they would have some.
They would have a benefit. They would have more. They would be allowed by right more density to build bigger, whereas before they would have to request that and get a conditional approval.
All right. So that's something that still is going to go before council. So
yes, still one more vote.
So will there be a hearing or something on this?
Yes, there will be a hearing. Probably, I believe they have about 2 months to consider it once the Planning Commission signs off on it, which they did last month, and send it to the council.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jessica.
Thank you.
Doug, back over to you. More football, college football this go round. LSU and Tulane, how are we looking?
Both off to great starts. Look, this football season could be one of our best ever. the way things have started. Look, Willie Fritz has done a great job at Tulane. He has them to the point where they can legitimately talk about competing for a conference championship. That's unheard of. Tulane's never won back-to-back bowl games in the history of the school. They look like a team. The team they beat in their opener, Florida Atlantic, was a team that won a bowl game last year. Tulane crushed them in the first week. All signs point up at Tulane. What Ed Ogeron has done at LSU, this is a guy who started last year, and you could safely say he was on the coaching bubble last year. And he is now, in 1 year, become one of the more entrenched guys. And I think I have seen a legitimately different Ed Ogeron. He has grown into the job. Look, college coaching is not like NFL coaching. Right now, all Sean Payton has to do is coach football. College coaches perpetually are coaching football, and they're perpetually recruiting, and they're perpetually dealing with this enormous administrative job of dealing with your own administration and boosters. It is really a three-pronged job. And Ed Ogeron was always great at the recruiting part, and it all goes together. You start winning and you get better recruits. Right now they've lined up the second best class in America for next year. They're off to a great start. It's a gauntlet of a schedule. LSU plays 5 teams that are ranked in the top 12 right now. It is a really difficult schedule, and the first one of those games is Saturday night against Texas, and that's when we'll all find out how really good this LSU team can be.
Okay, we'll be looking for it. All right, guys, time to look ahead.
This coming Thursday at Kingsley House, uptown, there's going to be a dedication of a statue of Patrick Taylor, the oilman who was a big supporter of it, and so they're going to be honoring him.
Okay, Doug, your turn.
Look, the Sports Foundation announced this week that the SEC Gymnastics meet is coming back to New Orleans in 2021. I think that's huge, and I think there's a chance for New Orleans to lock that up as a great event on a yearly basis. Broke all attendance records this past year.
Because tickets really sell for gymnastics. You're telling me.
LSU Gymnastics tickets is the hardest ticket to get in the state of Louisiana.
That's pretty
incredible. It is a great ticket, and it is if you've never seen a live college gymnastics event, it is so much fun.
All right. Jessica.
A trio of initiatives on the November 16th ballot. We talked about the October 12th ballot earlier, but this ballot would have a trio of initiatives that would fund infrastructure in the city of New Orleans.
All righty. Jordan?
Again, on the ballot, something we didn't really talk about, but the legislative races, one thing that's Republicans are expected to pick up some seats in the legislature, and a big question will be whether they have enough for a supermajority, and we'll have a story about that this weekend.
Okay, we'll be looking for that. And you say Coach O has done such a good job at LSU. Love to hear him talk.
Oh,
he's just got the
so
greatest
much
voice.
fun.
Put the closed caption on.
Right. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.